According to futurist Stoffler, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. My name is Gold Olamide Lawal, HR specialist and DBA student at Westcliff University. And today we'll be discussing developing VUCA leadership skills and attainable or unrealistic fits. During this presentation, we are going to unlearn obsolete leadership practices. We are also going to learn and relearn acceptable and emerging leadership practices for the 21st century. Now, let's take a deep dive into business and leadership before versus now. In the 20th century, an era described by scarcity, there were not so many business disruptions in the business environment, and leadership was pretty much straightforward. It was the era of information source, and there was top-down hierarchical leadership practices. Organizational leaders were keen on competing, and there was pretty much communication done one way, from top to down, top to bottom. But in the 21st century, with so many amazing changes that we've experienced in this era, organizational leaders are more focused on shared purpose. They are more focused on building communities and even collaboration. So now, what exactly is the VUCA paradigm and how does it affect this business environment? The VUCA, which stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, is an acronym that was coined in the military after the Cold War to describe a new emerging type of warfare. So what exactly does being volatile means? It refers to the sudden extreme and multi-layer fluctuations in the business world and how it has become difficult to identify these change patterns. Let's talk about economic instability. Let's even talk about the global pandemic, and several technological disruptions. In a more stable world, there were trends, there were charts, and business leaders were able to monitor these trends to make predictable and informed business decisions about the organization's future. But today, not so much. The business environment is also described as uncertain, which refers to the inability to discern the present using past data. Talk less of predicting future trends. And this definitely affects decision-making. Let's think about it this way. Would there be another pandemic? What new technologies would disrupt the industry in which we operate? These are the kind of questions that organizational leaders are now forced to ask. The business environment is also described as complex. Several different interconnected factors, they come into play, all of which have the potential to cause chaos and confusion for organizations. Talk about the rising quest for diversity and inclusion, increased globalization, and again, the pandemic and remote work. So business decisions regarding the what to do, the when to do, the why to do, and even the how to do have become more difficult to answer. The business environment is also described as ambiguous. Let's take a look at this picture. I know growing up, this picture was a big thing in my childhood. Is this a duck or is it a rabbit? That's exactly what the business environment says to us now. There's difficulty in understanding exactly what this situation now is for organizational leaders. Organizations are no longer able to provide simple yes or no solutions, but rather it depends solutions to organizational problems. So how exactly does the VUCA paradigm affect organizations? I believe it affects organizations in three ways: in the leadership styles they adopt. VUCA demands that you avoid traditional or outdated approaches to management and leadership, because these leadership practices will just not cut it anymore. It also demands more effective decision-making process. VUCA on its own as a concept, it has the capacity to increase the chances of making bad decisions. So business leaders are tasked with the responsibility to learn to implement future-driven problem-solving tactics. The VUCA paradigm also affects how employees are managed because of the uncertainty, the volatility of the business environment. It destabilizes employees. It makes them anxious and it demoralizes their motivation. So it is your responsibility as a leader or a potential leader to make sure that your employees are kept motivated at all times. So I'm not saying that all these obsolete leadership practices all of them should be neglected, but we need to adapt these leadership practices to achieve transformational changes in this era. Leaders need to navigate between the traditional and emerging leadership models, because a single approach to leadership would just not cut it anymore. So these great professors from Harvard propose that leaders need to reach outside their comfort zone to find a sweet range between the traditional leadership practices and the emerging leadership trends. So find a sweet range based on your personality, based on the industry in which you operate, based on the various factors that come to play. Find a sweet range between being a power holder and being a power sharer. Find a sweet range between being a tactician and being a visionary, between being the constant, between providing a consistent path to being an adapter that changes course, that adjusts to the course with new information. Find a sweet range between being a perfectionist and being an accelerator, between being an intuitionist and being an analyst. So finally, what are some of the acceptable leadership practices and behaviors that would really help bring forth these transformative changes in this VUCA reading environment? According to one of my best professors, Professor Magdalene, she proposes that you should, as a leader, as a potential leader, try to provide visionary leadership during volatility. Try to understand context during uncertainty. Try to create clarity in complexity, and try to provide agility in ambiguity. So how do you provide visionary leadership during volatility? You need to align everyone, which is your subordinates, your stakeholders, to the purpose, to the vision and the values of your organization. You need to be ethically compliant. You need to embrace your triple bottom line, which is your people, your planet, and profit. How do you understand context during uncertainty? You need to be able to nurture the right culture within your organization. You need to focus on delivering pure value to your customers. You need to review your organizational relevance. Will you still remain relevant in years to come? And then how do you provide clarity during complexity? You need to, first of all, be consistent in your corporate image. You need to thrive on operational excellence. And you need to learn how to implement appropriate business models as the need stems for, as you see the need, then just adapt. And how do you provide agility in ambiguity? You need to be able to embrace the power of diversity. You need to identify and implement continuous innovation. You cannot just stay and just keep doing things the way they used to be done. You need to adapt. So finally, I ask you the question, what do you think? What are you thinking? Do you think VUCA leadership skills, do you think it's attainable? Do you think it's an unrealistic feat? According to my research, I very much believe that it is attainable. You just need to enhance your emotional and social intelligence skills to be able to better relate and manage your employee, your subordinates, and all stakeholders. You need to be able to become a situational leader, to be able to adapt to situations and provide independent solutions. You need to know by now that one leadership style will definitely not cut it for you. Learn to engage in several leadership practices that will help you lead your organization effectively. And I will leave you with this question. So what are you thinking? I need you to take a minute to think about it. Do you think you can achieve this? Very soon, you are organizational leaders, or you are potential leaders, and you need to know these things. You need to be aware of these things. I hope to come back next year and maybe take it up from here and hear what you've thought about in the past years. Thank you. Any question?